Hey Tracy, I'm so glad after maybe a couple of months of trying to get together, we got together now.
We did
So
it. We did it, Joe.
persistent. Just thank you so much for being here, and Tracy. For those, first of all, let's make a quick introduction. So Tracy Gee, you are you come with a lot of experience, several decades of leadership, management, director, within business. You also have several degrees, anthropology, business, and then the leadership, master's in leadership. You've also have a really impressive resume with clients there. You're looking at Coca-Cola, Amazon, the Miami Heat. That's cool. I
That
love
was fun.
that.
Yeah.
But you just recently wrote this book, and did it come out this year or was it last year?
Came out in January of this year.
Okay, okay. So it's right around. So it's January, and it's called "The Magic of Knowing What You Want: A Practical Guide to Unearthing the Wisdom of Your Desires."
Mhm.
And when Scott, which everybody knows who Scott is on Vector, said, "Dude, you need to talk to Tracy." I'm like, "Oh, I follow Tracy, but I've never had a conversation with her." Um, and then I saw your body of work and the book. It just made so much sense because so many veterans are transitioning,
Mhm.
and they put a lot of emphasis on the job,
Yeah.
on the title, on the things that they think are measures of success. And I guess Vector exists because we've realized, and we've done the work with veterans for now almost 10 years.
Mhm.
There's a lot of work that you need to do before you get there, right? And so
Mhm.
it's the prep work, it's the looking internal and getting the sense of clarity. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of where you come in, and maybe you can share your perspective with your background, ways that maybe veterans can find clarity,
Mhm.
tools, ways to approach it, ways to think about it and consider how they navigate this space. And so, um, one of the questions, I have several questions for you, but one of them is, I guess, you have the word desire in your title. So how do you define desire? I guess, how
Mm.
would you define it?
Yeah, I use that word intentionally because I think it's a word that we tend to edit or try to sort of tamp down in us. I
Mhm.
think a lot of us are much more comfortable with the word purpose, and that resonates. And I think that's obviously a great thing to aspire for and to have in our lives. But I find that desire cuts a little closer. It forces us to be a little bit more honest about who we really are, and both in terms of, what we really love and what excites us and motivates us and what doesn't. And I think sometimes on the road to figuring out what it is, what our path is, we can jump too quickly past those things. So I use that word intentionally because I think it does get at those things of inner motivation, true desire. And I find that often in the many clients that I've worked with and seen, that is what it really comes down to. That's what unlocks the clarity, and that unlocks a sense of what your right path is, because what that is for you might be different than someone else. And I think a lot of times we get like a one size fits all sort of prescriptive, like you said, like climb this ladder, do these things, check these
Yeah.
boxes. And I don't really think that works for us. And I find so much more joy and meaning and impact and alignment when we can ask and start from that place of genuine desire, because that goes so far.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about clarity, um, and desire, and obviously it's super important. Um, but I think for the veterans that when they're leaving, how I guess how would it, like, say I'm a veteran and I'm about to transition, and you
Hmm.
kind of know my mindset. It's like, yeah, I'm not sure what the job's going to be, but I'm excited. I'm anxious. I just need
Sure.
to get a paycheck. I got
Of
all these
course.
things. And
Of
so,
course.
with your background of coaching, how would you kind of weave in that element of, hey, there's a couple of things I need you to think about, right?
Uh-huh.
How would you introduce that to say somebody like myself?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And let me just say too, it's such an honor to be here with you and to be thinking about this group of people. Yeah, so thank you so much. It's so inspiring. But I would say, one thing that I talk about in the book, or where we start, is just this idea of, I think when we start to try to look ahead towards what's next is natural for all of us in any kind of big transition, to sort of get inundated with questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I want? Yeah, but what's possible? What am I qualified for? What will
Right.
pay the bills and put food on the table? Who's going to want to hire? All these questions. I've been there myself. I have not served in the military, but I know what it's like to go through a life transition of like, I don't know what's next and I don't know what this
Yeah.
looks like. And that's a really tough place to be. It's very vulnerable. It's very, can be anxiety producing, like you said, for sure. And I think one thing that I try to help the folks that I'm working with do is to sort those questions
Mm-hmm.
and understand that some of those questions should have a little bit more priority and weight on them.
Mm.
Questions like, what really makes you come alive? And what do you love doing? And what do you not? And what, again, if you had a magic wand, like what would you create for yourself? Like, what would you want?
Yeah.
That's important. Even if again, like I'm very practically minded.
Sure.
I was raised by a mom who taught me how credit card interest works when I was like, in fourth grade. But so I'm not, I think there's a time and a place for some of those practical things, but I do try to help people say there's still a really valuable thing that happens to unlock your creativity and your resilience for this part of the process if you can tap into some of those questions first. So the way I
Mm.
discuss it in the book is there's primary questions and there's secondary questions. Primary
Okay.
questions are, what makes you come alive? What do you really want? Like what would be meaningful to you? How can you give yourself some runway to experiment and to see if there's multiple routes forward? And how do you process the things that'll happen? And then there's other questions like, am I competent? Will I be seen as competent? And what do I have permission to do? And, again, what's going to pay the bills? Those are important things too, but I call those secondary questions
Okay.
because they need to factor in, but I like to try to help people at least reserve some space to think about some of those more foundational questions. And oftentimes you can weave those practical, pragmatic concerns back in, but it's hard to go the other way, right? It's hard to
Right.
go all in on the just purely just, okay, all I'm going to do is the paycheck. Like, yeah, that can work. And sometimes you have to, sometimes there's a
Right.
survival thing, and I get that. But it's harder than to weave in that sense of authenticity and aliveness and joy and meaning that I think is so important for longevity and sustainability in our life and career.
Yeah. I love it. Sounds to me, again, I'm listening to this with veteran ears. It sounds like what
Mm.
I love is like a checklist, not so much a checklist, but a way to kind of compartment questions. And so you said there's primary questions and there's like sub questions, right? And I know inside Vector, we it's full of questions. So it's very similar, and the wording is very similar,
Mm.
but you can actually almost draw a line and categorize certain questions in one group of, okay, these are sort of like the external needs, like, okay, the job, the
Mm.
location,
Yeah.
the time constraint, because I've been deployed all these years, but now I want to be home. So I
Yeah.
need a job that fits within this parameter. But then there's this other group of questions, which, what makes you come alive? Where did
Hmm.
you find the most joy when you were doing the thing that you were maybe told to do,
Yeah.
but there was joy in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then there's the other category, I guess. I think Scott calls them the philosophical ones,
Mm.
which are, am I good enough?
Hmm.
Will I be accepted?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes veterans can kind of get stuck in any one of those categories, right?
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
guess, as a coach, like, what are some of the things, I guess, to help somebody get unstuck?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm sure you've worked with people that maybe can't get out of their own way. I know I've seen several. I was one of those people,
Yeah,
um,
sure.
and I had some powerful voices sort of help me
Mm.
navigate that.
Uh-huh.
What are If somebody's listening to this and they feel like, oh my gosh, Joe's like describing me right now, like,
Yes.
how
Yes.
could you how would you sort of help them, like, move forward?
Yeah. Well, I love how you framed those different sets of questions. It's fantastic. Well, one is what you named, which is I think don't feel like you have to go through it alone.
Mm,
Find
okay.
someone that can
Yeah.
help support you
Yeah.
because this is hard this is difficult stuff. It's not that easy to navigate, like you said, all those different sets of questions. That's no small thing. And I think sometimes we feel like, oh, okay, I got to buckle down. I got to figure it out. And sometimes really what we need is to reach out to a friend, reach out to a mentor, reach out to a resource, like someone else that can be there to lend support. Because I think when we do this together and do this in community, it's so much better. So I think that, and I'm sure that's a lot of what you're doing here with Vector, which is amazing. I think the other a practical tool that I help with if people are feeling sort of overwhelmed by just a sea of questions is to do an exercise that I call a question parking lot, where basically you just brain dump, get a piece of paper and a pen and just brain dump every single question that comes to mind when you try to think about your future. And oftentimes what that does is just, it's like how our brains process things. Like once you can articulate something, it moves it into a different part of your brain that it has much more to do with decision making and clarity and forward momentum. And so just that act alone, I think, can be really freeing. And then sometimes people have that experience of like, oh, okay, I just see it, in black and white on the page. That helps me feel like it can live there for a little bit. That's actually what I tell people, like just let it live there. Pick only a couple you think are the most important right now. Can't deal with them all, but let them live and just hang out here. Parking lot is like a very intentional word. Like let them just sit, they're not going anywhere. But I think that alone sometimes helps free up some brain space from all that overwhelm and anxiety. Because when those questions are running around in your mind, it's really hard to get to a place of clarity. So if you can just identify what those are, not feel the pressure, sort of unhook from that pressure to answer every single one right now and choose the most important ones. I think that usually gets you a lot further.
That's awesome. I mean, that it's pro tips, what you're hearing, folks. Like it's pen to paper. I mean, maybe you like to type, that's fine.
Sure,
but
sure.
I think it's kind of like a therapeutic aspect to it, right? Of pen to paper and staring at it or parking it.
Yeah.
And then maybe even pushing the desk away, go for a walk, get a meal, sleep on it.
Yeah.
Come back to it. Don't let it get shuffled under the papers, but
definitely.
Come back to it. So there's an intentionality is the other piece I think I hear. Because and that's one of the challenges we have with Vector and with this kind of discussion is veterans just want to move fast, get to the job. I just got to do what I got to do. But we're asking people to slow down a bit and have patience with this.
Right.
And I guess that kind of leads me to the next thing is, so, talking about desire and the veteran wanting to move so fast, like, why do I need desire? I just need to get a job. And where this kind of comes from, Tracy, and I can share this with you because, coming from a veteran into a civilian, veterans are used to not necessarily thinking about themselves as much.
Sure.
And I think, when people go to their jobs, they serve that company, they serve their teams, and good leaders really care for their people.
Right.
Same thing in the military. But in the military, it's like there's this aspect of what they, air quote, service for those that are listening, where you volunteer for this job and then you do it for 4 years and it turns into 10 years, 15, 20 years. And it's always this active service. Where do I go next? Where does the government want me to serve? Where does, what country do I got to go serve? And so what I've heard veterans do in job interviews, because this is woven into them over the years, is they describe themselves as a we. We did this. In my career, we accomplished these things. And interviewers and hiring managers and talent managers are like, wait, what did you do? And it's this shift in we versus me. And so to pull that thread on desire, like they're like, wait, what do you mean my desire? Like,
right.
I don't, I guess I can have desires, is that a thing?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts are with that. Yeah.
Well, I'm personally resonating so much because what you just described, that exact scenario with the interview, I've been through that, but for me, it's being an Asian American woman. So maybe there's some sort of Venn diagram in which
Yep,
there's an overlap there.
for
Exact
sure.
same scenario. Like, yeah, we did this because I was so proud of the team and how we all collaborated, and the feedback was
Humility, whatever you want to call it. It's like this,
yeah,
it's baked
yes,
into you,
a
right?
collective mindset, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
yeah, and the feedback was, well, what about you though? I want to know what you. I was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, so
I was there,
I'm
even though you
laughing.
only let it, right? Like
Right,
you were like, yeah. So,
right.
so I guess if you've experienced that, like, what's the advice? What's the how to
Well,
best approach it?
I think a lot of why I wrote the book was for folks that have been in that mindset. Like you have a love of service and community and country and others, and that's so admirable. But I think what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to be a both and or an either or. It can be a both and. You can
Okay.
think about your contribution, you can think about your community, and you're a part of that. You
Yeah.
get to be a part of that, I use that word magic intentionally, that you get to be a part of that magic of how you're meant to do that and how you're meant to embody that. Because there's lots of ways to embody service and love of
Mm-hmm.
others, and which I think is, again, so admirable and so important. But, I think what I was finding with the clients that I was working with was they were this similarly not putting themselves into that equation and not asking themselves those questions, not really factoring themselves in the whole way that they sort of imagined how life would go, or job and career. And I think what I started to see is, yes, of course, like we don't want to say like go be totally selfish and only ever think about yourself and screw everyone else, right? Like that's not what we're
Right.
saying at all. And the group of people that I'm working with, they're not even close to that. Like that is not the mistake that they're going to make,
Mm-hmm.
but they found so much more life and joy and thriving when they could also, again, start to ask themselves, what's my way to serve? What's my way to contribute? Of all the things I could do, what are the very best ways that I show up? And how can I lean into that? Because truly, what I believe collectively for all of us is if each of us is doing that, I think that's a win for all of us, because that's what we need. So there's a civil rights leader named Howard Thurman, and I quote and requote him all the time because I love this so much. But he says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Mm,
And I just love that mindset and that
mm,
ethos. And I
love
think
it.
that really speaks to those of us that, again, have sort of been conditioned to say like, no, others, that's the good thing. That's the noble thing to say, like, yeah, but your aliveness actually is one of the best gifts that you can give to the people and the communities that you care about.
Yeah, man, I love that. Whoa, that is so good. Um, vet, for the veterans that are listening to this, I think how can you take what you're hearing and make it real for you? Some of the work that Tracy does as a strengths coach, amongst all the other coaches, titles you have as a coach, which is really cool. But strengths coaches kind of look at the talents that you innately have, right? And
Yeah.
and so inside Vector, we have questions that help you look at your past experiences, not just in the military, but your whole life.
Yeah.
Pull various stories where you felt
Yes.
alive, where you felt fulfilled. It involved other people. There's a lot of details in there. But then there's going to be these strengths and maybe things that you never really paid attention to, but
Mm-hmm.
it's how you approached work. It's not just the what of the work, but it's how you approached it. And then
Definitely.
pulling on that and then realizing, and um, I love this idea of like, hey, we need you to be that,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is whatever that is. Now let's pull it forward. And I mean, we're talking about Venn diagrams already. So if we were to put some of those strengths and talents along with maybe things that interest you, industry,
Yeah.
roles, I don't know, where did
Mm-hmm.
those start intersecting? And
Definitely.
then we can pull on the thread of now let's invite people to this conversation
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, this is what I've written. I've parked on it for a while. I've done these questions. I'm sitting with it, but I don't want to be by myself figuring this out. Can you help me? What do you
Yeah.
think? Right.
Yeah.
And then come to a friend, a family member. And if you're bold enough and you feel confident enough, like I use LinkedIn all the time
Mm.
to find people that are doing the thing that I think I'm interested in
Yeah.
and say, hey, you have a really interesting career path. I'm a veteran, I'm in transition. I just kind of want to
Mm.
ask you about your career.
Love
Just have
it.
some questions. And then you
Yeah.
get that cup of coffee, right? Because we
Yeah.
ask the veterans to do cups of coffee.
Mm.
And you introduce, hey, this is the things that I used to love doing in the military.
Mm-hmm.
How does that jive with what you do on your career? What makes you tick in your
Mm.
career? What makes you
Mm.
come alive in your career? And I think that's the back and forth
Perfect. Yeah.
of what we're hoping
Yeah.
veterans will do.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that's a lot of work. That's a
It
lot.
is. It is. But you know what? It's less work than, spending 20 years in a career that you hate and that drains the life out of you. So a 30-minute coffee, like, sure, if you can save yourself however many years of,
Decades.
yeah, easily. I love that. In the book, I talk about that we have so much in common. This is so great that we're talking. In the book, I talk about that as like having an experimental mindset towards your own journey. So that's, I would say what you're describing in the coffee, that's an experiment. And it's a really
Mm-hmm.
good experiment to run because, again, you don't have to have gotten the job or spent 2 years in it to know like what you think of. You get to that info in 30 minutes and a conversation and make a
Mm-hmm.
connection. That's genius. And because, I think sometimes we think of things like so all or nothing, right? Like, oh, I got to like
Right.
quit the job and do this new thing. It's like, well, maybe, but that's a pretty high investment way to approach things. But if you can find lower investment, easier, more approachable ways to experiment, you get really good results. So I love that you have folks do that. I think that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy to do to encourage veterans to go that far because I think it's like, I mean, we both have you have one about to go to college. I had two kids that just graduated from college, but telling them, hey, these are tools to network and find potential roles and opportunities, and um, you know, here's a template, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
Vector is. It's like here's a template. Go do
Mm-hmm.
this. You'll find success with it. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good, mom and dad, and I'll have conversations with veterans. I'll say, no, I'm good. Clarity.
uh,
Sure. Sounds
yeah.
cool. I'm fine. But what's interesting, Tracy, is you talk to a lot of clients, and these are people at high levels of leadership that have been in roles. And I'm curious. Um, I found this now that I've been removed from the military now, and I'm inside the civilian world as a civilian now.
Mm-hmm.
In business, there's a lot of people that kind of have the golden handcuffs. They're good at their job. They're
Mm-hmm.
paid well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad culture, but they're just kind of going through the motions,
Yeah.
and they are probably not hitting on their greatest potential
Mm-hmm.
because that's not what the job needs, and that's just kind of
Yeah,
not what the job's asking for.
for
And
sure.
so what can veterans do? Because I think sometimes we put this pressure on, man, the job needs to have everything. Everything I am needs to be all contained in this one place.
Right,
And
right.
so I don't know, do you ever find yourself like coaching others to say, hey, what else? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you
No, for
help people kind of
sure.
think about that?
That's such a good question. Well, yeah, I know exactly what you're describing. And I had someone just tell me a couple weeks ago, they described themselves as being on autopilot. It's like what you're
Oh,
describing, like it's not terrible, it's not great. And it's
yeah.
just kind of going through the motions. um, well, I would say I think your question is so important because I think it really counters a mindset, which is like, I need to, yeah, everything I'm looking for needs to be found in the job. And that's just a lot to put on a job, right? Like, no, you want it to fit some things, but you're a whole person. So there's other, sometimes I talk about it as like there's different buckets in your life. And the job is a bucket. It's an important one for sure. But there's other ones in your life too. And just because it doesn't, a different bucket doesn't pay your bills, does that make it less important somehow or less
Right.
significant a part of who you are as a human being? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to someone who's um loves poetry, been writing poems since they were a little kid, and used
Mm,
to keep journals and journals of poems. Is that something that they need or want to have pay their bills? I don't think so. But is that less important about who they are? No, I think that's a lovely expression of who they are in the world, and I think that's fantastic. Or like, my husband, 1 year for Halloween, he did a real deep dive to recreate a very accurate Boba Fett costume for my younger son, like to the T. And he's a
yeah.
designer, so he's very, very attuned to details. Like, I'm talking multiple trips to Home Depot to get the right shade of green for the helmet, all the things.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
turned out really nice. But he was reflecting afterwards and saying, like, I loved making something with my hands. He's a creative director in his work, and so he's like, I don't get to do that very often, just like
Hmm.
physically. Now, does that need to go? Now, does he need to quit his job and go find a job doing that? Like, maybe, probably not, but
Right.
to say, like, oh, actually, this is something I can do outside of my work, but it brings a lot of joy and meaning to me, even though, again, it's not something that actually I'm never going to get a paycheck for. I think there's something really beautiful about that and very human. And I think it really counters this insidious message that, like, you are your paycheck, or the most interesting thing about you is what you get paid to do.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that's how just what it means to be human. And there's so much more to us than that.
I love that so much because I think as Scott and I we're developing Vector again, veterans learn about us because they're in transition and they need a job, and so they come find us.
Yeah.
But both he and I, and it's more than a job
Yeah.
that is at stake here with this type of work of figuring out your desires. Like
Mhm.
it bleeds into your whole life when you start becoming more aware and in tune to that. And I think that when I first discovered it for myself was not just in the job search, because I remember there was a time where I was unemployed Joe Lara,
Mhm.
and but I was asked to attend an event, and I attended the event, and that triggered a really cool whole different story where now I'm like, I think I tell the details inside Vector on one of the videos, but I landed in Kenya 6 months later because I said yes to this thing. And it had nothing to
Wow.
do with the job, but it had
Yeah.
everything to do with alignment. And so
Aw.
because I did sort of this purpose work,
Yep.
this what do I desire,
Yeah.
um, who are the people that I want to associate with more. I did a lot of this deep work. It allowed me to sort of land in places that I was not necessarily looking for, but it made sense. And
Yeah.
I felt it. It wasn't just like, oh, that's a logical thing. That's also a feeling, and
Mm.
I can chase that.
Yeah.
And I think that's our encouragement for veterans is this work that you're doing. It will help you make better choices for work. It'll help you
Yep.
make better choices with organizations, teams, where you spend your time, what hobbies you take up, which ones maybe even things you stop doing and you put down and saying, hey, that's not really helping me move
Mm.
forward.
Mhm.
And I think it's all great. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I love that
yeah,
story, Joe. That's beautiful.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Thank you. Well, let me see. We're about to end here our conversation, but I got to ask you, um, as somebody who coaches, um, what is what are some good questions? Because I think some of our audience are also other coaches that
Uh-huh.
are not familiar with the veteran community,
Mm.
um, and maybe they're not like ICF. Like they have a lot of models, and so they just give models. Hey, here's a veteran. Here, try this model. See if this works for you. But I think
Mm.
you have this understanding of like, hey, there's some brilliance. So how do we tap into the brilliance that's in front of me, right?
Mm.
Any I guess words of encouragement for coaches, even people that have already hired veterans and maybe they have veterans in their company now, and like how to help them, you know, um, find those strengths to bring it to work, find those passions to bring to work, right? What are
Mhm.
some things that maybe um, you could give for, I don't know, words of encouragement, ideas? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you said, I think a lot of the questions that you've already highlighted are so central.
Mm,
I never get tired of asking people, what's your favorite thing about what you do? Like what really excites you? And I never get tired of hearing people's answers because it's so unique to each person. I think that's some of the beauty of getting to have a conversation like that is
Yeah.
oftentimes people end up taking their own stories for granted and they don't
Yeah.
notice how beautiful and brilliant it is. They're just like, oh yeah, that happened. I liked it. That was good. That was positive, thumbs up, move on. But, when someone else can reflect back and say, whoa, you did that? That's amazing. Tell me more
Yeah.
about that. How did you think of that? What happened? Like to get to have that kind of conversation and dialogue is so important. So yeah, for anyone who's a coach, I'm sure you already do that. You already know that. But I think the real, power comes, I think, in, like you said, getting into the details, really holding that space, reflecting back, mirroring, because we lose sight of that. We take our own strengths for granted. We take our
Yeah.
own stories for granted. We sort of,
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, just it's like not being able to notice your nose because it's on your face kind of a thing. Like, and I just think conversations like that, they can open up new mindsets. I literally just finished, a call with one of my clients and he was feeling kind of down, feeling sort of like discouraged. He had a setback a few months ago
Mm.
and was, sort of processing that, finding his way forward. But, he's like, wait a minute, talking to you, I realized it's only been a few months. It's not that long. I'm like, exactly. Look at what you've done. You're moving forward. Like you're good. You're set up well. So again, and I think that is, some of the power of coaching and why it's important is because it's that relational space for someone to come alongside you and be like, hey, that's really great what you're doing. Like you're on the right track or, what, think about this a little bit more. So anyway, I think, I could go on and on about why I believe in coaching, but for sure, I think conversations like that are so transformational.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Tracy. Appreciate your perspective and your time, and just thank you for being so generous um, in this conversation. And so, for folks that want to find you, how can they find your book? How can they find you and get connected?
Yes. Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. The book is anywhere you find books. So, those sort of regular places, Amazon, of course, and the rest. My website is tracygee.me and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And if I can be of help to anyone in this community, I'd be honored.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tracy.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.